The highest-rated zombie series of all time, The Last of Us, has finally arrived at its second season. Mysterious cordyceps carry more types of infected individuals before the survivors. The hard-won social order is once again on the verge of collapse. How will the survivors choose this time? 5 years ago, Joel rescued the girl Ellie from the Fireflies base. The two then traveled to the camp, where Joel's brother Tommy was located. This place was known as Jackson. With the addition of many survivors, it gradually transformed from a camp into a bustling town, comparable to what it was before the outbreak. 5 years later, Ellie had grown into a young woman and learned many combat skills. Even compared to stronger men, Ellie held her own. In addition, under Tommy and others' guidance, Ellie's shooting skills had greatly improved. However, during this time, Ellie had picked up some bad habits. She looked like a rebellious teenager. The relationship between the two had become more distant, which worried Joel greatly, but Ellie seemed completely indifferent to Joel's thoughts. She even actively approached Tommy, hoping to switch from being a guard of the town to a patroller clearing out infected. Tommy immediately refused. Upon hearing this, he was not only worried about Ellie getting hurt, but also feared that this would expose Ellie's immunity to the cordyceps infection. Seeing that Tommy wouldn't agree to her request, Ellie loudly proclaimed her immunity to the cordyceps infection. Fortunately, there didn't seem to be anyone around to expose the matter. Even so, Tommy was quite frightened. He quickly stopped her actions, and ultimately had to agree reluctantly. So the next day, Ellie and her friend Dina appeared in the patrol team together. The outdoor mission was very dangerous, so patrol leader Jesse repeatedly emphasized the need to follow orders. While outside before they set off, seeing that there were no objections, the 5 members of the patrol team left the town. Since the initial stretch of the route was close to the town, and often patrolled, there was no real danger. As a result, everyone was quite relaxed. Ellie, participating in a mission for the first time, was as relaxed as if it were a picnic. She looked around curiously, like a curious child, but as the team went deeper, things got really dangerous. The team leader suddenly stopped, and the others quickly followed suit. They saw a pool of bright red blood on the snow not far away. Everyone immediately became alert. According to the rules, they had to report this immediately, then they would carefully investigate the source of the blood. But Ellie recklessly charged ahead. Her good friend Dina also expressed her support.
Recon, cat! Let's fucking recon!
Wait, guys.
Ignoring everyone's warnings, she insisted on following the blood trail to investigate. The rest of the team, unwilling to let the two go to their deaths, could only follow along. So the 5 reached the source of the blood. They saw a long-dead brown bear and many infected corpses. It was clear that a fierce battle had taken place here. From the traces at the scene, it appeared that the infected weren't entirely wiped out. The remaining ones were likely hiding in the nearby abandoned buildings. Exploring such a complex terrain was certainly beyond what they could handle. The team suggested once again that they should return to report according to the rules, but Ellie completely disregarded the rules. Not only did she intrude into the building to explore, but she also dragged Dina along. The others even offered to wait 5 minutes for Ellie and Dina to return. The two quietly slipped into the mall through a window. Although they were brave, they still maintained basic caution, so they explored very carefully. Before long, they discovered a fresh infected corpse. They were even more certain of their earlier suspicions, preparing to kill the remaining infected together. The two immediately used sign language to establish a simple action plan. Ellie then picked up a bottle from the ground and threw it hard to attract the infected people's attention. Taking advantage of the distraction, she quickly launched a surprise attack with her knife. In just a few breaths, she killed the infected. However, before they could catch their breath, the floor of the mall suddenly cracked. Unprepared, Ellie fell into the lower level. Dina quickly checked on her. Fortunately, there didn't seem to be any major issues. Dina instructed her to stay put. She would find a way down to regroup, but Ellie turned and left, casually exploring the level. So it was no surprise when she encountered more infected. Unlike the previous one, this one was very unique. It seemed to have some basic intelligence, and knew to hide from Ellie's side. However, its growls gave away its position. That creature was very quick. Not only did it dodge the bullet, but it also tackled Ellie from the side. The infected lunged for Ellie's abdomen. Feeling the intense pain radiating from her body, Ellie quickly drew her gun and shot the infected dead. However, the bite marks left behind were too obvious. Ellie hurriedly covered it up, pretending nothing happened as she returned to regroup with Dina. Because Ellie had repeatedly violated the town's rules during her actions, she was immediately put on trial by the town council. Upon her return, fortunately, Tommy was there to help. Ellie didn't face any severe punishment. This gave her the chance to go back and tend to her wounds. Ellie knew that her wounds couldn't be exposed to light, otherwise, her secret of not being infected would be revealed. So Ellie immediately used her knife to change the appearance of her wounds. Joel, who had always been concerned about her, was currently occupied by Dina, and naturally had no idea about Ellie's situation. Dina was quite curious about him. Through her observations over this period, she clearly sensed that the relationship between him and Ellie wasn't as simple as father and daughter, but no matter how Dina probed, Joel remained tight-lipped. Even outsiders could see that, so no matter how Joel denied it, the issue was clearly very serious. Joel naturally understood this as well. He had started consulting the town psychologist a long time ago, hoping that she could find a way to ease the relationship between him and Ellie. However, it was of no use at all. Even the psychologist stated that if Joel didn't disclose the whole truth, she couldn't provide the right treatment. Joel felt very helpless. Memories from many years ago kept flashing in his mind. Back then, Joel had been deceived by the Fireflies and brought Ellie to their base, thinking they would be able to develop a vaccine against the cordyceps, but he was told by them that Ellie's life had to be sacrificed. After much hesitation, Joel ultimately chose Ellie. He turned the Fireflies organization upside down, then he escaped with Ellie to this place. However, Joel's actions were misunderstood by Ellie. She later expressed her willingness to sacrifice herself multiple times. Perhaps from that point on, a rift had formed in their hearts. Joel knew that if he revealed all the truths to the psychologist, then Ellie's immunity would be completely exposed. This would inevitably trigger new dangers. Joel could only helplessly remain silent. As a result, the relationship between Joel and Ellie grew increasingly strained. Joel wanted to find reasons to care for Ellie, but he only received her indifference and evasions. He became increasingly anxious and yearned for opportunities to prove himself in front of Ellie. Not long after, at the town's dance, the old chef spoke to Ellie in a less than kind tone. Joel rushed out and pushed the old man to the ground. Such behavior not only failed to gain Ellie's favor, but instead made her more distant. Joel returned to his home, dejected, playing his guitar sadly. At this point, Ellie happened to pass by. Listening to that familiar melody, it felt as if they were back in the days of their adventures together years ago. But now, everything could never go back. In the end, Ellie still didn't forgive Joel. Little did they know that soon they would be forever parted. At this point, in a corner of the town, someone accidentally discovered that the terrifying cordyceps had spread to this area. This was clearly not a good sign. In addition, outside, an armed squad was eyeing them intently. These individuals were once members of the Fireflies. Their leader, Abby, was the daughter of a research doctor. If they hadn't been out on a mission that day, they would likely have also died by Joel's gun. Abby swore in front of her parents' graves that she would avenge them. In order to find Joel's location, they even joined a large organization called the Washington Liberation Front. With their help, they arrived at Jackson. As the sun rose again, Ellie seemed to have completely forgotten about last night. She was about to head out for patrol when she noticed that the townspeople were all hurriedly moving about. It seemed that something big was about to happen. After some inquiries, Ellie learned that another patrol team had encountered a large number of infected in the mountains not far from the town yesterday. Now, the town was in grave danger. Everyone was preparing to fight the infected to the death. As the council's representative, Tommy announced the battle plans to everyone. The elderly and children would take refuge in the defensive structures. The others would go to the rooftops to ambush the approaching infected. Regarding Tommy's arrangements, Ellie was filled with disdain. She thought he was making a mountain out of a molehill. However, as a patrol member, she had to follow the plan. She went out to scout the situation of the infected horde, but at this point, Ellie learned that Joel had gone out in her place a long time ago and hadn't returned since. Ellie felt a sense of unease, so she went out with the patrol team leader, who was also Dina's boyfriend, to search for their whereabouts. Little did she expect to be targeted by a figure. As soon as she left the town, that person was Abby. When they first arrived here, they didn't act rashly because it was nighttime. By daybreak, they were glad for their wise decision the night before. The scale of Jackson was far beyond what Abby and her group could contend with. However, she couldn't let go of her desire for revenge, so she secretly left her team to observe the situation in Jackson. The moment she saw Ellie and Joel, Abby had a bold idea. If she could capture them, she could interrogate them for clues about Joel. Then, she would launch a decapitation tactic. With this in mind, Abby immediately acted but lost her balance and rolled down the hill. Worse still, she fell right into the midst of the infected horde. Fortunately, due to the snow, those creatures were sluggish. Abby quickly fled, but how could the horde let her escape easily? Abby fought with all her strength and escaped into an abandoned mine. Before she could catch her breath, she discovered that the infected had found another way in. The iron mesh collapsed under pressure. Abby could only struggle to escape through the collapsing crevice. However, in just a moment, an infected creature also squeezed through the gap. Just as Abby was about to become a meal, a gunshot suddenly rang out. It was Joel and his group. They didn't know Abby's identity and quickly took her back to their hiding place. Abby was very grateful to this uncle, until she heard others call this Uncle Joel. The desire for revenge surged in Abby's heart instantly. However, they were now outnumbered. Abby devised a plan. She claimed that her companions were in a cabin on the mountain. As long as Joel and the others took her back, they could contact her companions to fight the infected together. Joel agreed without much thought. Just then, the infected followed closely behind. The group immediately set off For the cabin, unaware that they were racing towards death, however, oddly enough the infected, while chasing, suddenly changed direction. They all rushed towards the town. On the other side, as the townspeople were setting up defensive structures, they accidentally discovered that the pipes were filled with terrifying cordyceps. It was at this point that Tommy spotted a large number of infected charging towards the town. He immediately issued orders for everyone to proceed, according to the previous plan. As for the patrol team still outside, he could only order them to return. However, because Joel was too far away, he was out of radio range. Tommy decisively instructed the nearest Ellie and her companion to notify Joel to return to the town. In just that brief moment, the infected had already reached the outskirts of the town. Everyone hurriedly followed the previous plan, throwing barrels of gasoline from the walls. In the violent explosion, a large number of infected were wiped out. However, for the massive numbers, it was hardly significant. Moreover, the infected seemed to have gained some intelligence. Seeing that they couldn't breach the side, they instantly changed direction and attacked from the weakest point. Additionally, there was a massive infected among them. It had completely lost all human characteristics, and effortlessly smashed through the wooden walls. A large number of infected surged into the town through the breach. This was completely beyond Tommy's expectations. He could only make new arrangements. He took people armed with flamethrowers to the breach to block the invading infected. At this point, the infected once again displayed an astonishing level of intelligence. They all squeezed into the nearby buildings one by one. Not only did they avoid the flamethrowers' attack, but they also climbed up to eliminate the residents firing from above. They were nothing like mindless monsters. It was as if a commanding army was directing them. Tommy watched as the massive infected prepared to charge into the surrounding buildings. He quickly fired his gun to draw its attention, then he unleashed the full power of the flamethrower. However, this monster remained unharmed in the blaze. It slowly approached Tommy. Tommy could only retreat while shooting. However, the flamethrower ran out of fuel, and the creature didn't stop. Just when Tommy thought he was done for, the monster suddenly collapsed. Although he had dealt with the toughest one, the situation in the town was still dire. At this point, Joel's situation was also grim. He had managed to get Abby back to the cabin on the mountain, and immediately requested everyone to set out to rescue the town. But Abby suddenly changed her expression. She informed everyone that the uncle was Joel. Before he could react, the group subdued Joel. Dina, who came with him, was also subdued with tranquilizers. Their goal was clear: revenge. Looking at Joel's confused expression, Abby recounted their backstory. Then Abby picked up a golf club and swung it at Joel. By the time Ellie and the others arrived, Joel had already been beaten to a pulp. Moreover, because they were outnumbered, Ellie was also subdued by them. Seeing her anxious expression, Abby mistakenly thought Ellie was Joel's daughter. Therefore, she decided to make Ellie experience the pain of losing a loved one. So Joel and Ellie were forever separated, and Abby didn't kill innocent people, and then released Ellie and the others. She led her members back to their base in Seattle. Ellie looked at Joel's body. Beautiful memories flooded her mind in an instant. At this point, she remembered that her last conversation with him was scolding him for being reckless at the dance. Ellie's heart was filled with regret. Meanwhile, the town's resistance was nearing its end. They had paid a heavy price and finally killed the infected. Not long after, Ellie and the others brought Joel's body back to the town. Tommy stood there for a long time, looking at his brother's mangled body. He clearly couldn't accept this reality. Ellie also suffered severe trauma as a result. She often dreamed of the moment Abby killed Joel, and she would wake up immediately from the nightmare. This situation gradually improved. Only 3 months later, the psychologist repeatedly assessed Ellie's condition. Although she verbally answered perfectly, such poor acting couldn't fool the psychologist at all. However, for some reason, she chose to discharge Ellie when no one was paying attention. Ellie's expression darkened instantly. Like Abby back then, she vowed to make her pay in blood. Ellie returned to her old home. After 3 months of neglect, the place was filled with flowers sent by the townspeople for Joel. This scene further pierced Ellie's heart. She walked into the dusty room. There was no longer anyone waiting for her. Ellie's resolve for revenge grew even stronger. When she arrived at Joel's room, she saw Tommy sorting through the belongings that had been sent back. Ellie looked at the watch and the gun inside. Her emotions instantly shattered. She hid in the corner and cried quietly. Just then, Dina came to check on her. Her friend understood Ellie's intentions. She then told Ellie about the identities of the mysterious group. Ellie learned that the person who killed Joel was named Abby, a remnant of the Fireflies. Dina mentioned that she had seen a special wolf head symbol on their backpacks. Dina recognized it as the logo of the WLF. Upon learning this news, Ellie immediately went to Tommy, asking him to send a team to accompany her to Seattle for revenge against Joel's killer. Tommy expressed his dilemma. It wasn't that he didn't want to avenge his brother, but the town had just suffered a heavy blow. It was a time of rebuilding, and there was a shortage of manpower everywhere. Any expedition had to be voted on by the entire town council. Ellie, blinded by hatred, insisted on requesting a council vote. Dina's boyfriend Jesse advised her to prepare sufficient reasons. Otherwise, they were unlikely to agree. For this, Ellie prepared for a long time. The council convened on time the next day. Regarding the resolution proposed by Ellie, as Jesse had predicted, most people found various reasons to reject it, although it was indeed true, such as the current shortage of manpower. If a new invasion occurred, the lack of an armed team could lead to unimaginable consequences. Faced with this situation, Ellie was disappointed but had anticipated this. However, at this point, the old chef who had been pushed down by Joel suddenly stood up. He didn't join the opposing faction. Instead, he succinctly told everyone that killing deserved punishment, and it was only right. Seeing the old chef's righteous speech, Ellie's serious expression eased slightly. Then she took out the speech she had prepared all night from her pocket. She elaborated on the various reasons for her proposal for revenge. In addition to avenging Joel, Ellie emphasized that this was also to uphold the town's dignity. In her narrative, those people traveled a great distance just to torment one person to death in the town, then they left without any punishment. This was a contempt for the town's dignity. If allowed to continue, it would only make people think Jackson was weak and easy to bully. The consequences would be unimaginable by then. Ellie's reasons were very grandiloquent. They were unable to occupy the moral high ground, so they could only remain silent. However, this matter concerned everyone's interests. How could they easily agree? So when the voting results came out, there were only 3 votes in favor and 8 votes against. Ellie's plan to seek revenge for the town fell through. She couldn't help but feel disappointed. Given this, Ellie made a bold decision in her heart. She would go to Seattle alone to avenge Joel. Tommy, seeing Ellie's determined expression, quickly sought out the psychologist. He asked her about the likelihood of Ellie going out to seek revenge alone. The psychologist said that she would definitely do something foolish.
Tommy, I get it. You inherited her, and you want to keep her out of trouble. Some people just can't be saved.
At this point, Ellie was packing her gear at home, preparing to sneak out of the town that night. However, at this point, Dina suddenly came to visit. Ellie's preparations were exposed, but Dina said that she didn't intend to report her. She even claimed she wanted to help Ellie. Then Dina took out many items. Not only was there a detailed map to Seattle, but also a list of useful items. This delighted Ellie, but in the next moment, Ellie realized that many of the things on the list would be very hard to obtain given her current situation. Ellie was unwilling to wait even a moment longer. Dina had already anticipated her friend's feelings, so she simply assured Ellie that she would handle everything. They just needed to meet at the East Gate in the evening. The reason Dina was bold enough to make this promise was because another resident wanted to help Ellie. When they arrived at the meeting place that evening, Ellie was surprised to see the old chef there as well. She immediately understood everything. The old chef handed the prepared items to Ellie and the others. He stated that if it weren't for his injured leg, he would definitely go with them to seek revenge. Then Ellie and her companion quietly left the town. Just like Abby back then, Ellie also swore at her loved one's grave that she would make them pay in blood. In the following days, Ellie followed the route on the map. After an unknown amount of time, they finally reached Washington. It was a lush forest area. The two moved forward cautiously. However, they suddenly discovered a fresh corpse on the ground. This wasn't caused by the infected. Moreover, the person had a strange symbol on them, so Ellie and her companion guessed that he might be a member of a local faction. As they ventured deeper, more fresh corpses appeared along the roadside, and they all bore that strange symbol. Ellie and her companion confirmed their earlier hypothesis that a gang war had occurred here. However, the fact that those people even killed little girls was something Ellie and the others couldn't accept. After crossing the woods, the two finally arrived in the Seattle area. Although it had long been overgrown with various plants, the former prosperity was still evident. Considering this was the old hideout of the Liberation Front, the two were very cautious. Upon entering the city, this decision saved their lives, because not far away, on a tall building, a guard from the Liberation Front was observing the surroundings with binoculars.
You're all good. We can move up.
As this guard finished his report, a large number of Liberation Front members appeared on the streets. It was unclear what they were planning to do. On the other side, Ellie and the others were completely unaware. The Liberation Front was planning a major operation. The two continued to explore the city ruins, searching for the hideout of the Liberation Front. Occasionally, they spotted abandoned tanks left behind by the military along the roadside. Ellie was instantly filled with curiosity and tried to find something. However, not only did she find nothing useful, but she also made a loud noise by accident. But what puzzled the two was that the usually sharp-eared infected didn't notice the commotion. Something was clearly amiss. However, Ellie and her companion were unaware of the reasons behind it. They quickly fled the scene and found a hiding place in an abandoned store. To their surprise, it turned out to be a music store. Looking at the array of musical instruments, Dina was filled with curiosity. Ellie, on the other hand, simply stared at the guitars. It seemed to bring back memories of the time spent with Joel. She found a well-preserved guitar. Ellie played it on the spot, cherishing the memories of her time with Joel. Meanwhile, in the Liberation Front space, a bearded bald man named Charlie was Interrogating someone, through their conversation, it was revealed that the young man being tortured was actually from another gang in Washington, known as the Scar Gang. The corpses Ellie and the others had seen in the woods were all companions of this man. Members of the Scar Gang had very strong willpower, no matter how Charlie tortured him. He didn't yield. This deeply moved Charlie. He couldn't help but remember that over a decade ago, the official federal disaster agency controlled Washington. But those people, wielding power, allowed their subordinates to bully the citizens at will. Charlie could no longer tolerate such an environment, so he seized an opportunity to join the Liberation Front, which had similar ideals. With Charlie's help, the Liberation Front gradually eroded the Federal Disaster Agency. Now, they had completely swept those people into the dustbin of history, but the Liberation Front had also begun to change. Like the Federal Disaster Agency of old, it had become more brutal and bloody, so the Liberation Front had acquired a new nickname, the Wolf Gang, and the current Scar Gang was like the Liberation Front of the past. Charlie seemed to see his former self in the young man and was certain that such a person could never be made to yield. Therefore, he decided to give this steadfast warrior a dignified end. He shot him dead. After a brief rest, Ellie and her companion resumed their search for the Liberation Front's base. They stumbled upon a Liberation Front outpost. The two cautiously entered to take a look. However, they hadn't gone far before realizing something was off. The guard presence here was far too lax. It could even be said that there was virtually no defense at all. But soon, the two understood the reason behind it. It was clear that this outpost had been attacked. All the members of the Liberation Front had been brutally killed. The killers had left a mark on the wall, which was the Scar Gang symbol. Just then, Dina noticed that one of the bodies had a walkie-talkie. This meant that the events here would surely be reported to the Liberation Front. Perhaps reinforcements would arrive here shortly. They had to leave quickly, or they would be mistaken for the killers. But it was already too late. As soon as they finished speaking, they heard the sound of a door being broken open outside. They could only find a place to hide. Through a crack, they saw a large number of Liberation Front members arriving at the outpost. The Liberation Front members then scattered to search for clues about the Scar Gang. Ellie and her companions seized the opportunity to escape quickly, but got lost. They planned to randomly enter a room and jump out the window, only to find the window boarded up. Worse still, a member of the Liberation Front had already searched nearby. Seeing that they were about to be exposed, Ellie decided to fight. She launched a surprise attack from the corner, choking the man, but another member was approaching. Helpless, Dina had to take action. Although she successfully killed that person, the two were now exposed. Other Liberation Front members came rushing towards the gunfire. The two fled in a panic. The back door of the outpost was also sealed with iron bars. A sense of despair suddenly rose in their hearts. At this point, they discovered that due to years of neglect, a hole had formed in the wall below, just big enough for two to pass through. They quickly crawled out of the hole. The members chasing them could only shoot from behind. Due to their larger size, however, the crisis wasn't over. The two followed the narrow tunnel and arrived at an abandoned subway station. Meanwhile, the Liberation Front had already sent people to search the area. Seeing the distant lights, they could only hide in a corner, holding their breath. In the next moment, the members of the Liberation Front discovered that the train was covered in cordyceps. They immediately realized something was wrong, but it was too late. In the next moment, a large number of infected surged out from all sides, surrounding several men. Although they had weapons, they were overwhelmed by the sheer number of infected. Moments later, they were engulfed by the horde. Ellie and her companion were also spotted by the infected. The two immediately climbed onto the train roof and ran along the carriages, trying to shake off the infected. The infected kept pursuing them relentlessly. Not far away, there was a metal gate, and the two quickly climbed over it. They reached the other side just before the infected arrived. Afterward, they ran frantically to the subway station exit. However, the revolving door was completely rusted from years of neglect, making it nearly impossible to turn, and the infected were hot on their heels. They exerted all their strength to turn it, but they were still a moment too late. An infected chased after them. Seeing that Dina was about to be bitten, Ellie decisively blocked the infected person's mouth. Dina took the chance to shoot and kill it. After the two escaped the subway station and crawled into an abandoned building, successfully evading the infected, Dina immediately pointed her gun at Ellie because she discovered that Ellie had been bitten by the infected. Under normal circumstances, Ellie would soon become a new infected. Ellie could only reveal that she was actually immune. Dina didn't believe her. Ellie suggested isolating herself. Dina didn't want to harm her friend, so she reluctantly agreed to the plan. After that, Ellie quickly fell asleep. After an unknown time, she suddenly awoke from her dream and found Dina watching her from nearby. The time for transformation had long passed. Ellie was still perfectly fine. Dina had to believe her for a moment. Dina's attitude towards Ellie was very complex. However, the excitement of surviving led them both to choose to celebrate. Through deep conversation that night, Dina learned many things about Ellie. For example, the tattoo was used to cover the scars from the Infected bite. To Ellie's surprise, Dina was pregnant. The father of the child was Jesse, but at this point, she wanted to be with Ellie more. This child would be seen as their shared child. Ellie was a bit excited, and even began to envision that kind of life, but just then, the walkie-talkie they had taken from the outpost suddenly made a sound from it. They heard that the Liberation Front had a base in a place called Lakeshire. There was another base there. Ellie carefully checked the map, and confirmed the location of Lakeshire. Considering that Dina was pregnant, Ellie decided to go for revenge alone but was stopped by Dina. Dina wanted to share the same fate with her. Reluctantly, Ellie had to agree to Dina's insistence. Not long after, the two arrived near the Lakeshire base. The area was heavily guarded, with watchmen at regular intervals. It was absolutely impossible to force their way in. After careful observation, they noticed a gap in the security around a certain building. This building likely housed a large number of infected. It was improbable that anyone could pass through alive. That was why there was no security set up there. However, for Ellie, it was only a slight danger, so she planned to rely on her immunity to get through. On their way to the building, they saw many traces of the battles between the Liberation Front and the Scar Gang. It was clear that there had been a long-standing grudge between the two sides. Such a bloody scene made both Ellie and Dina feel extremely uneasy. Before long, the two arrived at the special building. Then, following their planned scheme, they avoided the Liberation Front's searchlights, cut the nearby barbed wire, and sneaked into the building. Since Ellie had complete immunity, she took the initiative to explore ahead. Even if she was bitten by an infected, it would only hurt a little. However, the situation inside was somewhat beyond their expectations. They had walked for a long time without encountering a single infected. This was clearly very unusual. The two immediately slowed their pace. As they continued deeper, they finally noticed some changes. An infected quietly appeared not far away. It immediately hid when illuminated by their lights. Dina had never seen an infected like this before. Ellie recalled the infected that had ambushed them before. Clearly, these creatures had undergone some kind of mutation, resulting in a degree of intelligence. Just as the two were about to take down the infected, they suddenly found many infected emerging from a corner. These intelligent creatures had learned to ambush and surround them. Ellie immediately told Dina to run, while she stayed behind to attract the horde. Although Ellie kept firing to draw the monsters, a few seemed to have locked onto Dina and relentlessly pursued her. Moreover, the continuous gunfire had alerted the Liberation Front's patrols outside, who quickly rushed into the building. At this point, an unexpected person suddenly appeared. It was Dina's boyfriend, Jesse. However, this wasn't a good time for conversation. He quickly helped to deal with the infected, then he led the two out of the building through another door. Evading the patrol's search, the three of them ran all the way to a dense forest. It was quiet and deserted around them. They finally let out a slight sigh of relief. Afterward, through conversation, they learned that not only had Jesse come here, but Tommy had also arrived. It turned out that the day after Ellie left the town, Tommy discovered that she was missing. He guessed that Ellie must have come to Seattle to avenge Joel, so he immediately brought Jesse along to search for her. Due to the lack of specific clues, they split up to search. After arriving in Seattle, Jesse accidentally found the place where the two had previously stayed. That's how he tracked them down. Now that he had found Ellie, Jesse said he would take them to meet Tommy tomorrow, then they would set off back to Jackson. Although Ellie didn't object, she clearly wouldn't accept this outcome. Just then, a firelight appeared not far away. The members of the Liberation Front had found this place. They immediately concealed themselves, preparing to sneak away. However, after walking for a short distance, they heard pleading voices nearby. They discovered that the earlier member of the Liberation Front had been captured by the Scar Gang. Without hesitation, they split him open from the middle, then they let him die slowly in agony. Such an act made the three feel a chill of fear. Just as they were about to sneak away, they were spotted by the Scar Gang. An arrow struck Dina in the leg. The three turned and ran. The Scar Gang members chased closely behind them. The three could only split up. Ellie ran at full speed. Upon seeing a large tree, she had a clever idea and crawled into the hollow beneath it. The Scar Gang members searched, but, seeing no one left, although Ellie had narrowly escaped, she was completely separated from her companions. But this was just what she wanted. Ellie had no intention of returning with Jesse. She took the opportunity to return to the Liberation Front's base. It was an old hospital building. Ellie found a dilapidated entrance. She easily infiltrated the Liberation Front's base, and soon discovered an enemy who had participated in killing Joel. Taking advantage of the enemy being alone, Ellie quietly approached from behind. By the time the woman sensed something was wrong, she was already in the sights of Ellie's gun. However, she figured out that Ellie was there for revenge for Joel, so the woman deliberately mentioned Joel. Ellie was momentarily distracted. The woman took the chance to throw nearby items at Ellie, and quickly fled. Ellie snapped back to reality and chased after her. The woman ran into a dead end. She had to quickly change her route, forcefully pried open the elevator door, and escaped into the elevator shaft. However, what the woman didn't know was that this would only lead to her quicker demise, because that blockage was actually left by the Liberation Front. Inside were things far more terrifying than the infected. Ellie also climbed down the elevator shaft. As soon as she entered, she found that the walls were covered in patches of cordyceps. As she went deeper, the cordyceps almost took Over everything, at this point Ellie was suddenly shocked by the sight before her. That person, although they looked alive, was already covered in cordyceps inside. Each breath released a large amount of spores, which was horrifying for Ellie to see. Behind that person Ellie saw other humans who had been consumed, but at this point, her only thought was revenge. Eventually, she found a woman in a corner of the corridor, who was infected and about to die. The woman looked at Ellie, noticing that she showed no signs of infection. After crossing the corridor, suddenly, she remembered something. She guessed Ellie's identity, but it was already too late.
Where's Abby?
Seeing that the woman refused to answer, she lost her only value. Ellie broke the woman's legs with a metal rod, and let her be consumed by the cordyceps there. Then Ellie fell into memories of getting along with Joel. At that time, Ellie had just arrived in Jacksontown not long ago. As her 15th birthday was approaching, Joel planned to throw a birthday party for her. To this end, Joel took out many cherished supplies to exchange with the old chef, and it wasn't easy to get the items he wanted. As soon as Joel got those bones, he immediately returned to his residence. After continuous polishing and carving, a guitar completely made of bones appeared in Joel's hands. This was the gift he would give to Ellie. Just then, Tommy happened to come with Ellie. Before Joel could tell her that he had prepared a birthday gift for her, he heard terrible news from his brother Tommy.
She was working KP and she burned her arm.
Joel quickly stepped forward to care about Ellie's condition, only to find that the burned area was exactly where the infected had bitten before. Joel immediately understood something. It was clear that Ellie wanted to cover up the past. Just as Joel had expected, Ellie wanted to leave the past behind and start a new life, which made Joel feel compassion. The next day, Ellie went downstairs as usual, only to find that Joel was already waiting there. Before Ellie could understand what was happening, he presented a birthday cake. Then Joel took out the guitar from the room. Seeing these two birthday gifts, Ellie was very excited and took the opportunity to make a wish for Joel to play and sing a song. Joel was a bit awkward for a moment. He was only good at playing, not singing. However, since it was Ellie's birthday wish, Joel thought for a moment and then started playing and singing. Although Joel hadn't practiced the content, his unique voice combined with sincere emotion still fascinated Ellie. When Joel finished playing and singing, Ellie immediately took the guitar and wanted to learn to play and sing from Joel. Time passed quickly, and soon it was Ellie's 16th birthday. Joel was still busy preparing a birthday gift for her as before, but this time it was more special, taking Ellie out for fun. During this time, they saw a wooden sculpture that looked very much like a dinosaur, and Ellie's eyes lit up when she saw it. However, the birthday gift prepared by Joel wasn't just that. Before long, they came to an old museum site. Although it had long been abandoned, the original decorations could still be vaguely seen. Looking at the tunnel like a galaxy and the wonderful celestial models, Ellie felt extremely curious. The highlight of the museum was the Apollo 15 spacecraft module stored in the center, which was a real cultural relic that had traveled through space. When Ellie saw it, she couldn't wait to get inside and experience the life of astronauts, but Joel quickly stopped her. Then,
going up to space, you need a helmet.
With Joel's help, Ellie selected a real astronaut helmet from a nearby display cabinet, and then contentedly got into the spacecraft module. Although a long time had passed, some equipment in the spacecraft module could still operate normally with Joel's help. The spacecraft began to play Ellie's favorite music, which is still one of Ellie's best memories. When she looks back, time went by, and another year passed. Ellie was on her 17th birthday. Joel, as usual, prepared a birthday surprise for Ellie. However, as soon as he opened the door, he was given a huge shock by Ellie. Joel saw that she was actually with another girl, and had some tattoos on her body. At this point, Joel felt as if he had never known Ellie before. The two had a fierce argument, and finally parted on bad terms. This incident created a deep rift in their relationship. The next day, Joel found Ellie packing her things, claiming she was moving to the garage. Joel wasn't sure if she was just angry, and advised her to think carefully, as the garage not only had no heating or running water, but also had very poor other conditions. However, Ellie was determined and didn't change her mind, no matter how Joel persuaded her. Finally, Joel reluctantly compromised, first apologizing for what had happened, then saying he would repair the garage first before Ellie moved out. Ellie had to agree, but this incident was like a nail driven into both of their hearts. Not knowing how to deal with it, Joel went to see a psychologist for the first time. Through understanding, he learned that Ellie's tattoo was a moth, which symbolizes death. Hearing this result, Joel was stunned. He realized that the distance between them hadn't started this time, but had arisen years ago, when he fled with Ellie from the Fireflies organization. Ellie still couldn't let go of what happened back then. Perhaps she truly wanted to sacrifice herself to save the world, but Joel couldn't bear to let that happen. Unknowingly, 2 more years passed. By now, Ellie had grown into a 19-year-old woman. She decided to take this opportunity to ask Joel about the Fireflies organization back then, but thinking of the vows he had made at the time, she once again put aside her doubts. Joel naturally didn't know Ellie's thoughts. He only wanted her to be happy, so he secured an opportunity for her to go on a patrol. which was something she had always dreamed of. Seeing that Joel had given such a birthday gift, Ellie was overjoyed and excitedly set off on patrol with him. However, Joel's detailed explanations of various safety measures for Ellie's protection only annoyed her. Just as she was thinking about how to get away from Joel, their communicators suddenly picked up a distress signal from other patrol members, who claimed to have encountered infected creatures. Upon hearing of the enemy's presence, Joel and Ellie immediately rushed to the location in order to arrive as soon as possible. Joel even forgot the safety rules he had just mentioned, and decided to abandon the main road and slide down a cliff instead. But even so, by the time they arrived, it was already too late. One patrol member was dead, another was seriously injured, and the infected had perished along with them. Joel recognized the seriously injured member as Eugene, the psychologist's husband. Eugene also recognized Joel and pleaded with him to take him back to town to see his wife one last time, but the request was firmly rejected by Joel, for he couldn't put the other townspeople in danger. Despite Eugene's repeated assurances that he had at least an hour before being completely infected, Joel remained unmoved. Ellie couldn't stand it anymore, and asked Eugene to prove the extent of his infection. After confirming it was still mild, she even took it upon herself to promise to take him back to town. Then, at Ellie's request, Joel reluctantly agreed. Ellie quickly went to fetch the horse, and repeatedly told Joel not to kill Eugene before leaving. Just like before, Joel gave Ellie his word, but shortly after she left, Joel took Eugene to a nearby lake. Eugene naturally knew what Joel intended, and Joel explained his reasons.
If you love someone, you can always see their face.
Joel fulfilled the other's wish through this sophistical means,
I see her.
and so Eugene died by the lake, and this scene was exactly witnessed by Ellie upon her return, leaving her in silent shock for a long time. The conflict finally erupted after returning to town. When Joel returned Eugene's body to the psychologist, he lied that Eugene had committed suicide to avoid burdening others. Ellie immediately accused Joel of being a dishonest liar, and then recounted what she had seen. Upon learning that Joel had killed her husband, the psychologist slapped him on the spot. This incident completely shattered the trust between Joel and Ellie, to the point that Ellie began to suspect that Joel had fabricated the story of the Fireflies organization being attacked. From then on, Ellie barely communicated with Joel at all. Even on the night of the party, when she saw Joel playing the guitar at the door, she simply walked away in silence. Perhaps Ellie also felt she had gone too far, so shortly after that night, she returned to Joel's side. After years of distance, they had an in-depth conversation again, and this time Joel told her the truth of what had happened back then. Ellie learned that the other party had killed the members of the Fireflies organization to protect her. However, Ellie still couldn't forgive Joel's deception, and this was Ellie's last memory of Joel. Now, Ellie returned to the stronghold and saw Jesse disinfecting Tina. She told Tina everything about encountering Abby's members and killing them. Then Ellie talked about her current concerns. Through her observations these days, she found that the Liberation Front was far more powerful than she had imagined. If they wanted to take revenge on Abby, they would definitely encounter huge resistance. Moreover, since Tina was now pregnant, Ellie didn't want her to get involved, as this was a problem she had caused. Subsequently, Ellie also told Tina about the Fireflies organization. After hearing Ellie's story, Tina was also shaken, and decided to give up helping Ellie take revenge. Jesse was naturally happy, as his plan from the beginning had been to take the two of them back to the town. Jesse had long harbored resentment towards Ellie, who had caused everything, and had long wanted to abandon her. Jesse didn't hide this and made his feelings clear to Ellie on the way to meet Tommy. Moreover, through Jesse's complaints, Ellie learned that both he and Tommy had actually sneaked out of the town to look for her and Tina, which made her feel even more ashamed. At this point, a burst of gunfire broke the awkward silence, and they quickly looked for a place to hide. Unexpectedly, soon after, a member of the Scar gang entered the hiding place. Before Ellie and the others could react, a group of Liberation Front members also entered and immediately subdued and took away the Scar gang member. Ellie wanted to step forward to stop them, but was stopped by Jesse, as their mission now was just to evacuate safely. Shortly after, they arrived at the predetermined location to wait for Tommy's arrival. However, after a long time, Tommy still didn't appear, and Jesse immediately had a bad feeling. Just then, a voice came from the walkie-talkie they had seized, and they learned that the Liberation Front had been attacked by an unknown force at a nearby dock. Jesse immediately concluded that it must be Tommy, so he quickly took out a map and identified the location of the dock on it. The two immediately went to provide support, but shortly after they left, Ellie suddenly stopped, for she saw a special cruise ship in another direction not far away. According to the information she had obtained before, Abby was hiding on that cruise ship. Jesse ordered her to give up revenge and go to meet Tommy. However, at this point, Ellie was filled with the fire of vengeance, and she ignored Jesse's order, heading alone toward the cruise ship's location. When Ellie arrived at the shore, she found several members of the Liberation Front not far away. Just as she was about to take them all out, she Saw many dazzling lights suddenly light up on the sea, then she saw those soldiers carry many boxes onto speedboats, and leave with the small boats. Ellie didn't know what they were up to, nor did she care. She only noticed that there was a leftover small boat by the shore, and she decisively used it to go to the cruise ship. However, just then, a huge wave suddenly rose on the sea. When Ellie woke up again, she and the small boat had arrived at a coast. Before she could get up, several men suddenly controlled her and took her to a stronghold. Only then did Ellie realize she had mistakenly entered the territory of the Scar Gang. The other side mistook her for a member of the Liberation Front, and immediately decided to kill her. Although Ellie tried to explain, the other side didn't believe her at all. Just as Ellie was about to be hanged, members of the Liberation Front suddenly attacked another stronghold of the Scar Gang. These people quickly went to support, and Ellie narrowly escaped death. Then she quickly returned to the shore and took the small boat again to go to that special cruise ship. After an unknown amount of time, Ellie boarded the target ship. She checked around and found it extremely empty. If it weren't for the gauze with just wiped blood on the table, she would have thought there was no one here at all. Following this clue, Ellie kept going deeper into the ship, and finally found two living people somewhere, and Ellie recognized them as Abby's companions from that day. Ellie controlled the two with a gun, and the man actually tried to fight back. As expected, he was shot and killed by Ellie on the spot. Now there was only one hostage left. Just as Ellie was about to force the other to reveal Abby's location, she noticed blood gushing from the woman's neck, obviously from being accidentally shot just now. Before Ellie could react, the woman suddenly fell to the ground. Only then did Ellie realize that the person was actually pregnant. The woman seemed to want to use her last strength to take out the fetus in her womb, but she completely stopped breathing before she could act. Ellie not only failed to find Abby, but also caused the death of an unborn life, which made her feel extremely guilty. If Tommy and Jesse hadn't arrived in time to take her away, Ellie would probably have stayed there in a daze for a long time. This incident had a great impact on Ellie. During this time, Ellie thought a lot, especially about revenge. At a certain moment, she seemed to understand something. If revenge continued, it would only make the hatred between each other grow more and more. At this point, Ellie decided to let go of her hatred and return to the town with Tommy and others. Just as she was telling Jesse and others her decision, gunfire suddenly came from outside the stronghold. She and Jesse immediately went out to check, and the moment they opened the door, Jesse was shot and killed on the spot. Only then did Ellie see clearly that the person who came was actually Abby, who had learned that Ellie had killed her companions and came for revenge. Ellie wanted to use the theory she had just realized to make Abby let go of her hatred and at least spare the unrelated Tina and Tommy, but the other party was so angry at this point that she couldn't listen at all. With a gunshot, the story came to an abrupt end. The Last of Us Season 2 was released in April this year. As a film adapted from a famous game IP, this season has undergone a lot of adaptations due to the game itself, and there are also some original elements. The final ending of the film is better than that of the game itself, giving people more room for imagination rather than a fixed result. As for the rest, there are too many issues to know where to start complaining. Perhaps everyone can leave the point they most want to tease in the comments section. If you like my channel, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to it.